So we'll create a fail situation. The fail situation would be that that crate has health, and the zombies, through getting close to it, are actually taking health away from it. So we're going to use a system that is going to be very similar to the way that we subtracted health from the actual zombie. If you'll remember, that was the fire manager taking health away from a different FSM, an FSM that was placed on the zombies. So what we'll do now is we're going to set up just a little bit of UI to communicate the health of the stockpile. And after that, we will allow the zombies to affect that health and start subtracting from that HP pool that exists on the stockpile. So let's create the visual representation of that. So to do that, back in my scene, and I haven't saved for a while, I should probably do that. Save scene, save project. Okay, so we're going to create now, we're going to create some UI, and we're going to create, first we'll just do a, just an image, and this will be just a blank image, and that's created this giant rectangle in my scene. That's my UI. To adjust UI, you always want to put the scene side by side to your game view so that we can adjust it. Let's see. Okay, so now that we're looking through the scene, I'm going to hit T, and that's going to give me my special manipulator, and I can see that I'm moving my object backwards. And what I'll do is I'm going to nest the health in the upper left corner. That seems like a reasonable place for it. So what I'm doing right now is I'm just creating a back frame for the health number to sit at, and that one will be black, and I'll have white text, and I'll just do maybe like a little bit of a fade on it so that I can see through. It's not obstructing me. Of course, when the game is finalized and polished, you're going to want to replace this with an actual image that you create in Photoshop or Illustrator. Right now, this is just a placeholder. So we kind of stuck that to the corner, and we resized it to being to occupying the space that we wanted. Now we're going to set these rect transform points. Instead of doing this and making it my entire canvas, I just want to put all of the rect transforms into the top left corner. And the rect transforms specify how far from the corner of the screen that object is going to stick to. So what we're saying with everything being in the corner is that this piece of UI is always going to be 0, 0 pixels away from that corner. And the last thing that I need to do to make sure that scale maintains, so you can see right now that it is sticking to the, if I resize my window, it's sticking to the appropriate corner, but it's not being sized appropriately. It's not shrinking with my canvas. So I'll select canvas, and I'll say under the canvas scaler script, scale with screen size. So now, as I scale, you can see that it's also, that image that I made is also scaling with the window. And in fact, it's probably a little bit too small at this point. So let me scale it up just a bit, like so. Okay. Great. So this one I'll just call my window back. Now I'm going to put some text that goes on top of this. So I'll right click and go back under UI. I'm going to put text, and we'll call the text our health text. Oops. Like that. And we'll start that health text at 100. I'll go ahead and center the position of the text both vertically and horizontally. and I'll make sure to make it white so that I can see it against the black window. All right, let's zoom in here. So it's coming in too small. I'm going to resize the text bounds to match that window. And then I'm going to scale up my font size, like so. All right, and that doesn't need to be a raycast target either. We can turn that off. In this situation, it doesn't matter, but generally, if you don't click on it, you don't want that to be a raycast target. Okay, so I think that looks good. If we want to be even more clear, we can add something else to this. Let me go ahead and just give this a scale test. So you can see that the health text is also maintaining the scale, even though we didn't move the rect transforms on the text. And the reason that's happening is because whatever the object's parent is, it's going to obey the scaling properties of its parent. So because we set that on the window back, we don't need to worry about the text itself. That's going to maintain a constant position with its parent. So the other thing that I do want to do is I want to attach a little bit of GUI, just a little bit of an image so that we know what the health represents. And here I have an image that I found online, and I brought it into my project, and I just made sure that I set the import type as being a sprite 2D or UI. And I do that in the inspector when I select the object in my project. So those are just import settings. And what I'll do is I will go back to the window backing, and I'm going to insert an image, which is also parented underneath. And I'll go ahead and just position this a little bit to, you know what, I'll go ahead and I'll move this to the left. So instead of just leaving it blank, I'll go ahead and copy my UI, or excuse me, my sprite icon into the source image slot, and you can see it's appeared as my health briefcase there. And I want to make sure that this comes in the size that I intend, and so I'm going to make sure that preserve aspect is turned on. And it's already square, so it didn't change, but if you ever see a difference between the textures that you author and what they're coming in at when you put them into the image script slot, just make sure that the preserve aspect is checked on, and that should clear up. So okay, I'm going to resize this. I'll move that guy about there, and then I'll just extend the window backing like that, so I can fit the icon and I can fit the text in the same window. So I'll just go ahead and move this guy over here like so, and I can space out my text like that. Okay, great. So now I just have a lovely piece of temporary HUD that kind of reports what the health of the stockpile is at all times. And so I can use that to kind of gauge my progress in the level, and I can use it to measure my level of success. So that's always going to stay on. And let me go ahead and name this image. As my health icon. Okay, so now we know what everything is. So all we need to do now is we need to create an FSM that's going to update this health based on how many times it's been hurt by the zombies. So to do that, I can put that FSM anywhere. So I'll just go ahead and I'll do that to the canvas. And this FSM is going to look very, very similar to the FSM that we put on the zombie to take off health there. So I'll create a variable which will be our stockpile health, and I want that to be an int, not a float. And I'll go ahead and set that value to match what we have printed in the beginning, which is 100. And so in our first state, that's just going to be our initialized state. And if we ever restart the game after dying, after getting a game over, we want to make sure that we're always resetting this number. So in that first state, we want to convert the int that is in the variable, which is 100. We want to print that eventually, but we can't print a integer. We have to print a string. So we're going to need to take the integer and we need to convert it to a string. So we're going to use the action int to string, convert int to string. And that int is going to be our stockpile health. We're going to convert it to a new variable, which we're going to call stockpile health prints. And then we just need to put that string into the text input field. So I'll type in text and text set text. Yeah, that's the right one. Okay. So we're going to be using the UGUI text set text action, and I will drag in my health text field to the game object that we want to affect. And the text that we're going to be printing there, that's going to be our stockpile health print. All right. So right when we pop into the game, we're going to look at that, whatever number is in that variable, and it's going to be printed on the screen right away, right after it's converted to a string. We'll give that string to the set text, and it'll input that, and we'll see that number change. So after our initialized state, we're going to be waiting for a message that the stockpile has been hit, that the zombie's gotten there. So I will create an event, and I will call this action. We can't use hit because we've already used hit, and that's going to be confusing. So this action is going to be called a damage taken. So we'll go ahead and click on our first state, add transition damage taken, move that into state 1, which is going to be where we subtract health. So again, we're going to do an int add, but we're going to subtract. And we will say that every time a zombie hits the target, let's do a -10. So the int variable will be our stockpile health, and we're going to be subtracting 10. So let me select both of them using a shift click. I'm going to do a Control C for a copy. And then whenever I update this number, I always need to reconvert it and reprint it. So in our first state here, we kind of just initialized and we grabbed the variable and we printed it. The second state, we subtracted the health, but we're not going to see that update unless we convert it to a string and we print that string again. So anytime we're changing that number, you need to use the conversion and the set text so that that updates. All right, so much like the zombie 2, we need to, I'll just use a finish state to go to the next state. We need to test whether or not we still have we're still playing the game. So we can do a health check here as well. And we can do an int compare. This is just like the zombie health. So of course we're going to be comparing against the stockpile health, and two possible outcomes. One would be still alive, and the other would be a game over. So let's add those transitions now. Still alive, we'll go to state 1, and a game over to a state 2. So if we're still alive, we're going to go to a, we'll call it an OK state. And the state 2 will be the game finished. And we'll call it game lost. It's not just finished, it's lost. Okay, so let's go ahead and use those events to move into those two states. So if it's equal to 0, we've lost the game. If it's less than, which it can't be, we would also lose the game. And if it's greater than, we are still alive, like so. All right, and we don't need to do that every frame, we just need to do it when we first enter this state. So if we're okay, we just need to reset the system so that we can take damage again. So that would be a next frame event. And we need to create a reset state. So we'll use the reset in the next frame event, and we'll attach the reset to our first state. Add global transition reset, like so. And if we lose the game, that's where we need to tell the player that basically you are dead, the game is over, and we need to give them instructions as to what to do next. And in this case, I think what we'll do is we will specify that we'll give them a key press or a button press, and we'll say, if you want to continue the game, if you want to start over again, go ahead and press spacebar or whatever. I'm actually going to update my zombie prefab. I don't want to enable my zombie to take damage off of the stockpile. So I'll grab my zombie prefab, like so. And we do want to edit the prefab. For right now, we'll edit the instance. So there's the zombie. He's in my scene at 0, 0, 0. Let's go ahead and move him out of the ground. So what we need to do now is we need to create a trigger box that will detect whether or not the zombie has gotten close to the object. So to do that, we're going to create a 3D object. We'll create a cube, and we'll assign that cube to the zombie so that it's a child of the zombie, and we're going to move it out in Z, in positive Z, and we can shrink it down. And we can size it to whatever you think is fair. This would be like the zombie's outstretched arm. So if it gets within this range to the stockpile, it will do damage to it. And that stockpile, it's kind of hovering above the ground, so it might not be able to be intercepted by that cube. So, okay, I think that lines up. I think it can enter it now. And so we'll just, we'll rename that cube our attack trigger. and we'll make sure that it's assigned as a trigger. And then we'll go ahead and give it that invisible material so we can look at it and we can debug it. So that was a temp object material, like so. There we go. And so I need to create a layer too, because I do want to hide this. But I'll wait. I'm going to hold off on hiding it just yet because I want to, let me update, let me apply the changes to the zombie. Apply. And I just want to make sure that that cube is facing the right direction, that it's in front of the zombie. So yeah, it definitely is. Okay. So now that this guy's updated, what I'll do is I'll start adding an FSM to this trigger to detect the stockpile. And to detect it, I need to give it a specific tag because that's how the trigger is going to know that it's actually intercepted it. So I'll add another tag and I'll call this stockpile. Now I will assign the stockpile tag. And with the trigger volume, what I'll do, I'll edit the instance. Is I will use a trigger event. So the trigger event will detect when something enters that trigger with the collide tag, stockpile. And when it does, I will send the finished event. Like so, all right. So now I need to decide what to do after the zombie has gotten close to the stockpile. So for sure, the first thing that it's going to do is it's going to subtract health. And we've already set up that system. We just need to send the send that event. So I'm going to type in send event, and we'll attach that action. So the event that we want to send, let me remember here, where is the health system? Okay, so the health system exists on our canvas right now. All right, so the event that we need to send is this damage taken. So underneath my events, I just want to make sure that I can talk to it from another FSM. So I'll mark it as being a global event. And on that attack trigger, if the object intersects the stockpile, we'll go into this second state where we will send that global event. We just need to give it a target to send it to. So we need to tell it to send it to the canvas. So in order to do that, again, this is going to be a prefab, and it's not necessarily going to know what the canvas is until it spawns into the scene. So we actually need to specify that the canvas, the object that has that FSM, we need to actually specify what object that is. So on the attack trigger, let's go ahead and name that. Oops. So we'll go ahead and store that canvas as the, we'll call this the, we'll call it the stockpile FSM. I could have put that FSM anywhere. It was convenient at the time because I was subtracting health from the canvas, but I could have just as easily have put that on the stockpile object itself, which may have been a little easier, but I'll go ahead and show you guys a different way that we can find this game object in the scene. So for right now, we've just named that empty game object container stockpile FSM. So the way that we store that canvas as being the stockpile FSM is we need to do another find game objects. So as soon as we get into this action, we're just going to look for that canvas by name, canvas, and we're going to store it as the stockpile FSM. So now the send event will know where the FSM lives that we want to talk to. And the event that we want to send, if I look at my global events, is going to be the damage taken. Okay, that looks correct. So the first state, we're waiting until the trigger interacts with the object marked as the stockpile. And then the second state, we will actually send that hit message. So we'll go ahead and rename this state. We'll call this send damage message. And that first state will be outside trigger. So okay, we've now moved into the stockpile. We're subtracting health. And just to review, because this is a prefab, we cannot just drag the canvas into the game object target. It doesn't know what game object that is. It's not going to know until it enters the scene. And that's why we're using the find game object to grab a hold of that canvas, and then we'll store it. And we'll use the variable that we're storing, and we will send the event to that game object's variable. So let's go ahead and test that out. So right now, I'm going to go ahead and hit apply on this little zombie guy. So what we should see is that the zombies are going to clamor around our game object, and they should be sending those hit messages as they get close to it and subtracting health. Okay, so we were trying to detect when these triggers were colliding with our stockpile, but we weren't able to, and I figured out why. So the reason that the triggers weren't working is because the triggers only work if they're colliding with a rigid body object, and our stockpile does not yet have a rigid body. So we're going to assign a rigid body component so that the triggers can detect it. And then the last thing that we need to do, so the rigid body is going to be able to be moved around by those zombies unless we mark it as being kinematic. And kinematic will kind of just hold it. Kinematic is telling the rigid body that we're going to be moving it in code. And that's just so that we can like freeze it and make sure that the zombies don't actually move it around of their own free will. So, okay, so let me go ahead and apply any unsafe changes I have to this zombie, and I'll go ahead and get him out of my scene, and then we'll go ahead and test to make sure the rigid body can take damage. So here we go. Here's our first attacker, and boom. Right away, it's subtracting 10 health. Okay, so this is good. All right, so now we definitely have a lose condition. Let me just make sure that these guys aren't moving the crate around. Okay. So, you know, another thing I'll do, let me bring the zombie back out. I want to turn off that attack trigger. I don't want you to be able to see that when the game plays. So I'll create a new layer and I'll just call this invisible. There we go. And I'll make sure that this little trigger cube is marked as the invisible layer, as well as the zombie spawn points. So let me just go ahead and apply my changes to this guy, and then I can get him out of my scene. Delete. And those zombie spawn points, those guys, they all need to be invisible as well. Yes, I want to change the children. Okay, so this should be cleared out of my scene. Shouldn't be able to see those anymore. Oops. So we just need to tell our camera not to render those. So I'll go in and grab that camera, and underneath my culling mask, I will say everything but the invisible. Okay, now should be good. Yep, okay. Well, we're still able to hit that trigger. We'll go and grab, what is it? My fire manager, which is going to be doing that ray casting. And on that ray cast, I can give it a mask. And what I'll do is I will mask out the invisible layer. And so that should ignore, the raycast should ignore those objects, I believe. Either that or I need to invert this. Let me give this a shot. Yeah, we're not hitting anything now. So let's go ahead and invert that raycast. Invert mask. There we go.